"An example," he said. Thus commenced the story of Princess Golitsyn and the Crone of Kudrovo. "One stormy night in St. Petersburg," related the Count, "young Princess Golitsyn was on her way to the annual ball at the Tushins'. As her carriage crossed the Lomonosov Bridge, she happened to notice an 80-year-old woman on foot, hunched against the rain. Without a second thought, she called for her driver to stop the carriage and invited the unfortunate soul inside. The old woman, who was nearly blind, climbed aboard with the footman's help and thanked the princess profusely. In the back of the princess's mind may well have been the presumption that her passenger lived nearby. After all, how far was an old blind woman likely to journey on a night like this? But when the princess asked where the old woman was headed, she replied that she was going to visit her son, the blacksmith, in Kudrovo, more than 7 miles away. Now, the princess was already expected at the Tushins', and in a matter of minutes they would be passing the house, lit from cellar to ceiling with a footman on every step. So it would have been well within the bounds of courtesy for the princess to excuse herself and send the carriage on to Kudrovo with the old woman. In fact, as they approached the Tushins', the driver slowed the horses and looked to the princess for instruction. Here the Count paused for effect. "Well," Nina asked, "what did she do?" "She told him to drive on." The Count smiled with a touch of triumph, and what is more, when they arrived in Kudrovo and the blacksmith's family gathered round the carriage, the old woman invited the princess in for tea. The blacksmith winced, the coachman gasped, and the footman nearly fainted. But Princess Golitsyn graciously accepted the old woman's invitation and missed the Tushins' altogether. His point expertly made, the Count raised his own cup of tea, nodded once, and drank. Nina looked at him expectantly. "And then?" The Count returned his cup to its saucer. "And then what?" "Did she marry the blacksmith's son?" "Marry the blacksmith's son? Good God, certainly not. After a glass of tea, she climbed into her carriage and headed for home." Nina mulled this over. Clearly, she thought a marriage to the blacksmith's son a more fitting conclusion. But despite the shortcomings of history, she nodded to acknowledge that the Count had delivered a well-told tale. Preferring to preserve his success, the Count opted not to share his normal coda to this delightful bit of St. Petersburg lore. That the Countess Tushin had been greeting guests under her portico when Princess Golitsyn's bright blue carriage, known the city over, slowed before the gates and then sped on. This resulted in a rift between the Golitsyns and the Tushins that would have taken 3 generations to repair, if a certain revolution hadn't brought an end to their outrage altogether. "It was a behaviour befitting a princess," acknowledged Nina. "Exactly," said the Count. Then he held out the tea cakes, and Nina took 2, putting one on her plate and one in her mouth. The Count was not one to call attention to the social shortcomings of acquaintances, but giddy with his story's reception, he could not resist pointing out with a smile, "There is another example." "Where is another example?" "A princess would be raised to say please when she asked for a cake, and thank you when she was offered one." Nina looked taken aback, and then dismissive. "I can see that please would be quite appropriate for a princess to say when she has asked for a cake, but I can see no reason why she should have to say thank you when she has been offered one." "Manners are not like bonbons, Nina. You may not choose the ones that suit you best, and you certainly cannot put the half-bitten ones back in the box." Nina eyed the Count with an expression of seasoned tolerance, and then, presumably for his benefit, spoke a little more slowly. "I understand that a princess should say please if she is asking for a cake because she is trying to convince someone to give her the cake. And I suppose, if having asked for a cake she is given a cake, then she has good reason to say thank you. But in the second part of your example, the princess in question didn't ask for the cake. She was offered it, and I see no reason why she should have to say thank you when she is merely obliging someone by accepting what they've offered." To punctuate her point, Nina put a lemon tartlet in her mouth. "I concede that there is some merit to your argument," said the Count, "but I can only tell you from a life of experience that—" Nina cut him off with a wave of a finger. "But you have just said that you are quite young." "Indeed, I am." "Well then, it seems to me that your claim of a life of experience may be premature." "Yes," thought the Count, as this tea was making perfectly clear. "I shall work upon my posture," Nina said quite definitively, brushing the crumbs from her fingers, "and I will be sure to say please and thank you whenever I ask for things. But I have no intention of thanking people for things I never asked for in the first place."